Okay, folks, good evening. My name's Adam White, and see if I can't adjust this a little bit. There we go. It's time for the Alaska Airmen's Association Government and Legislative Affairs Update. And I am only on Facebook tonight. Something happened to the Instagram account, and I got logged out, and I can't get back in. So we'll have to deal with that in the office tomorrow. So apologize for that. If folks are able to come back later and watch this on YouTube, yeah, that's why I'm not on Instagram tonight. Apparently something happened and updated the app, and it kicked me off of the Alaska Airmen's Instagram account. So here I am on Facebook only tonight. So that's all right. Still plenty of things to talk about. And just wanted to give folks another minute or two to join us this evening. Looks like we've got a few folks, a handful of us that are here tonight. I am again, of course, coming to you live from the hangar here in Nenana, where I am based out of, and do lots of other things besides just the Alaska Airmen's Association. But grateful to have a hangar, especially on these cold, wet days that we get here in August, which, by the way, there's snow already been falling in the Alaska Range today. A lot of folks have been coming through on their way to go sheep hunting up in the Brooks Range, and then we know moose season is not that far behind as well. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the topics that I've got for us to talk about this evening. I was able to go to OSHKOSH this year. I have a confession to make. This was my first time going to OSHKOSH. I had never been there before. I've been involved with aviation since I was 13 years old, is when I started working at my local airport in my hometown. And that's been a while ago, actually many more years than I care to think about. But I've never made it to OSHKOSH until this summer. And so it was a great opportunity for Abby Austin, the executive director of the Airmen's Association, and myself to head down to OSHKOSH. Had a chance to visit with a lot of the vendors that come to the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering, and so that was great to network and see those folks there. I also had an opportunity to talk to a lot of the movers and shakers with the 100 low lead issue, because we all know that OSHKOSH is where everybody goes. And so I've got a few mosquitoes in here that are driving me crazy. So hopefully they don't get close to the microphone and you can hear the buzz. But I opened the hangar door earlier today, and the mosquitoes just invaded the place. So back to 100 low lead issues at OSHKOSH. You've probably heard already that there's an initiative. The EPA is actually in the process right now of doing an endangerment finding for leaded fuel. Aviation fuel is the only remaining leaded fuel. And we anticipate an announcement before the November elections as to what their finding is going to be. We're pretty sure they're going to say that lead is dangerous. We kind of know that already. But they're going to come up with a timeline, at least an initial report, as to what they'd like to see happen with leaded fuel. So the industry is trying to get ahead of that narrative and come up with a working group, of which the Alaska Airmen's Association is a part of. And we've had several meetings. I've already talked about some of this already, but was able to talk to some of those folks face to face, whereas previous to that had been virtual meetings, and talk a little bit more about the process and what our goals are and the plans and all that kind of stuff. If you want to do some more research on what is coming out of that initiative, you can type in your search engine, Eagle 100 low lead, and you'll be able to, got that mosquito, good. You'll be able to find out what's been going on there. There's 4 pillars for this process, and so we're working and making some headway there. It started to rain here in Nenana just now, so hopefully the drum of the rain on the roof is not too loud for you. One of the things I was able to accomplish at OSHKOSH was talking to not just the engineers when it comes to the actual blending of the fuel. Swift Fuel was there, GAMI was there talking about their fuel. A lot of other folks talking about alternative fuels. But I did some studying and some homework and was able to talk to some of the folks that have some answers. and other folks that have more questions than answers. And I'll have to admit to you, I'm a little nervous about where we are right now when it comes to finding a direct drop-in replacement, is the phrase that keeps being used. I'm a little concerned that maybe sometimes the definition for direct drop-in replacement may not be the same for everybody. For me, and for the perspective of the Alaska Airmen's Association, direct drop-in replacement means that not only will the engine run on that fuel, which is what has been said about some of these other fuels that are out there right now, but the entire fuel system will be able to handle that fuel long term. And that fuel will have some of the same properties, possibly including storage. We know that here in Alaska, we need to be able to store fuel for more than a month at a time to be able to have fuel because of our supply chain here in Alaska. Some of these alternative fuels that are being proposed have a 30-day shelf life. That's not going to work. That is not a direct drop-in replacement, in my opinion. Some of the fuels that are being proposed eat up components in your fuel system, like the O-rings in your fuel selector, like the gasket in your gascolator, like your rubber bladdered fuel tanks. That if you have a Cessna or some of the other aircraft that use fuel bladders, some of these fuels have been demonstrated long-term testing to possibly cause some issues with that, especially with older fuel bladders. There is some hope and some promise that 94 unleaded, which is basically 100 low lead without the lead, that shows a lot of promise. There's talk of possibly needing to change to electronic ignition systems to be able to burn some of these fuels. There's talk of maybe water and methanol injection that would allow the higher compression big bore Continentals and Lycomings to burn some of these alternative fuels. That is not a direct drop-in replacement. Sorry, that doesn't meet that definition in my book. But we're making headway, we're making progress, we're not done with this yet. There are many years of more research and refinement that's going to go into this process. So, all that to say, the Alaska Airmen's Association is on it. I'm working this issue. I've had a conversation with some of our delegation in Washington, D.C. about this issue. They are asking good questions, actually very informed questions. The staffers are doing their homework, and that's a good thing. So this process is not going to be quick and easy, and I'll keep on top of it for you. So some of the other things, walking around OSHKOSH, looking at some of the new things that are being displayed, you know, the RV-15 that was there, that was pretty cool to see. Maybe I'm a little biased. I fly and operate a mall. It's sitting right over here. A lot of the numbers really match a mall. But, hey, it's a home built, and a lot of folks want to build their own airplane. To be honest with you, it's kind of on my bucket list to build a home built at some point, maybe as a retirement project, if I ever retire. You never know. But it was good. It was good to walk around and talk to vendors. I had a lot of questions for some of my own personal flying. Was able to talk to some of the vendors there and get some answers. I bought a helmet at OSHKOSH. I've been wanting to buy a helmet for many years. Some of the flying I do, well, not some, most of my flying is off airport, and talk of a helmet has come up numerous times. The Alaska Airmen's Association, I was involved with the fatal and serious injury accident study that the FAA did many, many years ago, where helmets were talked about as being one of the best chances of increasing survivability in an aircraft accident. Shoulder harnesses were first, by the way, if you were curious about that. If you're interested in reading that report, and again, the mosquitoes are attacking me. If you're interested in reading that report, just do a search for Fatal Serious Injury Accident Report, FAA, and you'll find that report. Pretty interesting read, actually. So I came home with a flight helmet. Came home with some other goodies along the way as well. Some of them are sitting here on my desk, as a matter of fact. But it was a great time. Really enjoyed being there. Very beneficial for the Alaska Airmen's Association. A lot of the vendors were great. Great to see them again, and they all commented about how glad they were to see us as well. So getting ready for next year's Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. Some of the other things that are going on. A lot of you have reached out to me about concerns with aircraft registration and the delays that that's taking. And it is a painfully slow process right now. So if you are in the midst of waiting on your registration to come back to you and it's been more than what the 90 days is, know that the FAA has extended that 90-day period for the temporary to be valid for up to 120 days now. But they're still having a difficult time getting those processed within 120 days. So if you're getting close to the end of that 120 days, let me know. Reach out to the local flight standards office and see if we can't help you get a little bit more of an extension on that as well. So something new and exciting that's happened actually just yesterday. Yesterday was the kickoff meeting for an FAA group in response to an NTSB recommendation. You know that in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, we've got some CTAF areas. The Common Traffic Advisory Frequency definition has changed for Alaska to include more than just the airport, but a specific region. And that process, updating those CTAF frequencies in the Mat-Su Valley because of a mid-air collision with fatalities, was a long process, and it's not a perfect solution by any stretch of the imagination. And there are some serious issues that are going to be addressed at some point in the future about frequency congestion and all those things. The same issue exists on the Kenai Peninsula. And you may remember we had a fatal mid-air collision down on the Kenai Peninsula a couple of years ago. And the NTSB recommended that the FAA do the same thing in the Kenai Peninsula that they did in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. And so myself, along with several other industry partners and the FAA, had our first meeting yesterday to talk about that process and kind of set some boundaries and establish the scope. And so it's going to be a long process, but if you fly in the Kenai Peninsula area, Kenai, Soldotna, Tahomer, Nikiski, in that area, you know that some of the frequencies overlap. And there's confusion as to which frequency you might need to be on in a particular area coming and going, especially from some of the lakes. And we don't want to have any confusion about what frequency you should be talking on. So if you have some ideas, if you have some opinions about what you'd like to see happen on the Kenai Peninsula, please reach out to me and let me know, because if we don't have a lot of that data, the outcome is not going to be ideal. I do fly on the Kenai Peninsula several times during the year, but I am not based there. I'm based here in the interior, and as a transient user, I have some ideas as to what would help transit users coming through the area, but totally different needs than what the folks that are based in the Kenai Peninsula might need. So I'm asking you to help me, help you. You got to let me know. So you can go to the Alaska Airmen's website, alaskaairmen.org, and you can find my contact information there, and I'd be excited to hear from you. No real new information about Birchwood and the municipality of Anchorage. I mentioned to you last month that the job posting for the Merrill Field Airport Manager, looking at that job posting online, it does mention Birchwood, but it's an attempt to make whoever the candidates are aware that there's a possibility that that would be added to the scope of their job responsibilities. It's not a foreshadowing of something that's a done deal. The municipality of Anchorage is still working through some of their concerns and questions with DOT. DOT is still gathering data for municipality of Anchorage, and it's not a finished deal at this point. There will be times for public comment along that way, so listen in for a heads up from me and from the Alaska Airmen's Association. Something else that happened in the past month, I renewed my flight instructor certificate and worked through an online course through AOPA to renew my flight instructor certificate. If you're a flight instructor, you know that 16 hours of continuing education credits every 2 years, and great process working through that. I did find a couple of errors and was able to talk to the folks at AOPA directly. John Collins, the chief flight instructor for AOPA, talked to him while at OSHKOSH. I've known John for many years, and we're able to sit down and work through and talk about some of those things. and they're in the process of fixing them. So I learned a lot. I'll admit that training was good for me to be able to go back and refresh some of the things, as I am not a full-time active flight instructor at this point in my career. I was early on back in the day, but I still keep my CFI current for many reasons, just because, matter of fact, I'm going to fly with a buddy tomorrow and do a biannual, well, to do a flight review. We don't call them biannuals anymore. To do a flight review tomorrow. So anyway, interesting to work through that process again every 2 years, and encourage you to do some continuing education, even if it's not for your CFI certificate. If you're not a CFI, there are other online courses you can do. I've mentioned this to you in the past, that it potentially could help you with your insurance. I know for me it does help when I document those courses and things. It helps the broker go to the underwriter and say, hey, Adam is not that big of a risk because of, and be able to list off those things. So I encourage you to do that as well. With the change of season that seems to be coming earlier, with snow that happened yesterday or last night in the Alaska range, and now talking about frost here in the interior, a lot of rain in the Anchorage Bowl. A lot of the fire-related TFRs have gone away. There's still occasional TFRs that are out there with the military doing some recovery efforts from crashes from many, many years ago that have resurfaced. Again, want to remind you, please, 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 please check for NOTAMs and check for TFRs before you go flying. We've had a TFR just outside of Nenana all summer long, and it amazed me how many folks flew through that TFR not even know it existed. You give us a bad name. You give general aviation a bad name when you do that, and it definitely impacts the ability of the firefighters to do their job. Yes, it was frustrating that it was there all summer. Incredibly frustrating that we did not have an instrument approach here into Nenana because of that TFR. But they kind of needed the TFR, maybe not to the exact size and the duration. But there's some questions that have come up about the TFR process that myself and Tom George with AOPA are working through with Anchorage Center, with BLM, and with forestry, and all those things to just help us understand a little bit more about that process and see if there's anything we can do for give and take. They have a job to do, no doubt. We also have a legitimate need to be able to still fly and do the things that we're doing as well. So expect some maybe progress before next year, but maybe not. We'll see. The last thing I want to touch on tonight is an update on the Canadian ADSB requirement. You know that here in the U.S., there is an ADSB requirement for certain airspaces and certain altitudes. For us here in Alaska, the only place ADSB is required is within or above the Anchorage Class Charlie airspace or above 18,000 feet. In the lower 48, that 18,000 foot level drops down to 10,000 foot. The 18,000 foot level is where you are required to be 1090 extended squitter format for ADSB, both here in Alaska and in the lower 48. Now, Canada is in the process of coming up with their ADSB mandates. They elected to go space-based with their ADSB network, not ground-based like we are here in the United States. And that's been posing a problem because most transponder antennas are not able to hit a satellite because they're mounted on the belly of all of the airplanes. And so Canada said, well, you're going to have two antennas. We'll fix this. That's an easy solution. Just put two antennas on the airplane. That is not an easy solution. Some airframes, there's just no way to do that. Some other airplanes, it's very expensive to do that, especially when you're dealing with pressurized aircraft. Anytime you puncture that pressure vessel, that's a big deal. So Alaska Airmen's, along with other user groups and industry groups in the United States, worked with our Canadian cousins, specifically the Canadian Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and submitted some questions to NAV Canada and to other parts of the Canadian government, asking questions about what they were going to do, what their ideas and what their plans were. The initial plan was that February of 2023, there was going to be an ADSB mandate for Class Bravo airspace. That's a problem. You can't get that done that fast. Supply chain issues alone, you can't do that. And then, of course, the bandwidth of the avionics shops, which we ran into that problem here in the United States with our ADSB mandate. So there's some give and take, and I'm checking my notes here to make sure I get this right. But the current timeline for ADSB equipage in Canada is August 10th, 2023. So a year from tomorrow, you will be required to be ADSB out in Class Alpha airspace. Now that's basically 18,000 feet and above, and you'd have to be 1090 dual antennas, diversity antennas, on August 10th of 2023 to fly above 18,000 feet in Canada. May 16th, 2024, Class B airspace is when that mandate goes in. Charlie, Delta, and Echo will not be any earlier than 2026 for their ADSB mandate in Canada. So what that means is for most of us going between Alaska and the lower 48 or vice versa, we can stay out of Class Alpha. That's not a problem. Class Bravo airspace, we could probably avoid that coming and going as well. So according to the current timeline, 2026 for Charlie, Delta, and Echo. We do fly through Charlie, Delta, and Echo type airspaces in Canada, coming back and forth between Alaska and the lower 48 and the typical general aviation aircraft. So we're still working this issue. The Alaska Airmen's Association is a part of that conversation. Right now, as it stands, and I'm just going to read this to make sure that I get it right, an antenna able to broadcast out towards space-based ADSB receivers emitting 1090 extended squitter is what's required in Canada to meet their mandate. This requirement can be met either through antenna diversity, an antenna on the roof and an antenna on the belly, or with a single antenna that is capable of transmitting both towards the ground and towards the satellites. Transponders with a bottom mount antenna alone are not sufficient to meet the requirements of their mandate. Now, there is one supplier of ADSB equipment that does have an antenna built into their unit. It goes on the tail, replaces the tail nav light, and it has a split antenna that will do both space-based and ground-based. And you can do a search for that, or you can reach out to me and I'll tell you more about that. You probably already know about it anyway. But there are some antenna options that are out there. Garmin has some solutions. Uavonics is the one I was talking about with their Tail Beacon X. Meets the Canadian requirements for their upcoming mandate. But again, we've got a few more years to deal with this, not February of 2023 like it looked like for a while. So for most of the airspaces that we're concerned with, 2026 is the current deadline. So we've got about 4 years for Canada before that's going to be an issue. So with that, those were the things I had on my list. I haven't seen any questions popping up here as I've been talking. I'm scrolling back through them now. And of course, there is a mosquito right on my ear trying to distract me here. Again, just want to quickly apologize. Instagram, somehow I got logged off of the Alaska Airmen's Instagram account, and I cannot get back on it. And I didn't realize that until about 5 minutes before I went online. So apologize, I didn't check that sooner. But that is why I am not on Instagram tonight. So hopefully we'll get this up on YouTube in the next day or so, and we'll post something on Instagram to remind those folks over there on that platform of where we were tonight. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say goodnight. Just want to quickly remind you that with hunting season already in progress and moose season coming up, a lot of folks will start flying that haven't been flying very much this summer. So please be careful. Please be cautious. Don't push the weather. Do your weight and balance. And don't just say, oh, yeah, it's sitting there. That rivet's out of the water on the floats. We're good to go. Or I can still pick up the tail, or the tail's not dragging. Actually do a real weight and balance if you haven't done one in a while. You may surprise yourself what you may find out when you do that. Again, I'm going to be blunt and totally honest with you. I'm tired of friends dying in aircraft accidents that were so easily preventable. Please don't do anything foolish. Please don't go out there and push the weather. Don't overload the airplane. Fuel is expensive right now. Totally get it, but it's not worth your life. An extra trip is expensive, but it's a whole lot cheaper than a bent up or broken airplane or injured or fatal accidents. So on that happy note, sorry to be such a downer at the end. Thank you again for watching. My name's Adam White, Government and Legislative Affairs for the Alaska Airmen's Association. I encourage you to look at our website, find out more about what we do and how you can reach out and contact me. If you're not a member, please consider joining the ranks of our membership. There's quite a few benefits that go along with it, and it helps fund and operate the government and legislative affairs activities that I do. Also helps fund scholarships to get folks into aviation and do other things for us. And you can see that mosquito right there in my eyes. Okay, I'm going to say good night. We'll talk to you again next month, folks. See you.